In a world full of noise, the leaders that stand out are the ones who truly listen, not just to respond, but to understand. Welcome to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. My name's Julia Felton, and I'm going to be your host and guide for the next 20 minutes while we dig into the fascinating topic of noticing and listening. And these are really forgotten skills, I believe, of conscious leaders because we live in an environment that is incredibly busy. I think we can all agree that. And actually, in this really frenetic, busy environment in which we live, I think the best gift that we can give anyone, our team members, our colleagues, our clients, our family, is our time and attention. So that's the topic that I want to delve in today about noticing, listening, and paying attention. So, how do we cultivate this level of paying attention and noticing to what is happening around us? And I'm going to share in a moment a little bit about what the horses have taught me about the power of attention. But what I know to be true is that in life, when I am most present and paying attention, is when I'm most fulfilled, joyous. I just feel way more connected. And I'd love to share with you a little story about how I started to learn about this power of noticing and being present. Because I took a break from the corporate world and I took a sabbatical and I traveled in Africa. And as many of you, I had a pretty high flying corporate career. I was traveling around the world, running the data analytics division that I'd set up within the corporate space. And it was a bit like having my own business, but doing it with the support of a corporate around me, which was really rewarding and really fulfilling. Or at least I thought so. And I was got to a point where I was pretty much nearly burnt out. And I've always been an avid traveler. I love to travel. I traveled a lot when I was a child with my parents. And I had for my 30th birthday gone to Africa and absolutely loved being on safari and living in the African bush. When I got to a point where I was feeling a little bit burnt out with my corporate life, I requested a sabbatical because I was really fortunate that's something that my company allowed. So I actually took a year off on a sabbatical and spent the first 6 months at a horse rescue in Colorado and the second 6 months traveling around Africa. And I was in Namibia. And I was in an elephant conservation project at an organization called ERA, the Elephant Human Relations Association. It was an incredible experience. We went there and we volunteered. I was there for nearly a month. The first week, we were building things like stone walls to prevent the elephants from getting to the water source that was looking after the villages. A lot of these villages in the Namibian desert were very remote, very reliant on water. And the problem was that the elephants were also looking for water and they'd come over and they'd knock over their water wells and water pumps. Proved to be really challenging for the villagers. And so we were dealing with a bit of tension and animosity because the villagers understandably had some frustration with the elephants because they were ruining their crops, stopping their water supply. So we were trying to find a way to balance that tension. So one of the things that we did was went to go and build these dry stone walls around the water pumps to keep them safe. So that's what we were doing for 1 week. And then the following week, we'd actually go out on an elephant safari and we'd go and find the elephants and we were tracking them and everything that was happening. And so one night we're sitting around the campfire and I'm chatting with my colleagues, and somebody asked a question and they said, "Who's been swimming with dolphins?" And I quickly put up my hand and said, I had, because I had been for my friend's 30th birthday. I had been to Mexico and we'd been swimming with dolphins. And then somebody asked you a question, and the question the person asked me was, "Julia, tell me about the experience. What was it like?" And in that moment, I was absolutely floored. Because apart from knowing that I've been swimming with dolphins for my friend's 30th birthday, I have no other recollection of the experience. I don't remember what happened. I don't remember where in Mexico we were, how many dolphins there were. I don't remember how I felt, whether I was excited, how I experienced it. I just don't remember. What I realized was that I was going through life ticking things off a bucket list, things to do. And I wasn't really very present to what was happening. I was participating, but because I was never in the moment, I was always worried about what was happening at work, either in the future or what had happened in the past. I was never really present in the moment. I wasn't never really paying attention to what was going on around me. And so I made a few decisions once I'd had this massive insight. And as some of you might know, I ended up going to live in the African bush for about 3 to 4 months because I figured, how do I learn to get present and grounded and live in the moment? I need to be in an environment where my safety is my number one priority, right? And if I'm living in the African bush, I could be some lion's dinner if I'm not paying attention to what's going on. So I went and did that. But what's so interesting is that the horses are masters at paying attention. Because as prey animals, if they don't pay attention to their surroundings and what's going on, then they will end up as some lion's dinner. So the horses have become masters about teaching me about this power of attention and noticing and how important that is. And so this is what I wanted to share with you today. Because most of the clients I work with and many of the people I talk to are really not paying attention to what's going on around them. In fact, one of the biggest challenges for people that come to my equine facilitated leadership workshops is actually staying in the moment and paying attention and being present. And of course, when you're around the horses, you need to do that because otherwise you could very easily stick your foot under the horse's hoof and get sore feet, or stick your fingers in their mouth and end up with a bitten finger. So you really need to pay attention to what's going on. And the horses will only let you lead them if they know that you're a leader worth following. And the way you can demonstrate that you're a leader worth following is by showing the horse you are aware, you are in the moment, you know where the danger is coming from. So often when we're working with the horses, all of a sudden we see the horses all of a sudden get alert and look up and look at something. The best thing you can do in that moment is look in the same direction as the horse, which signals to the horse, I know that you've seen something over there. I see the danger too. Now the horse feels supported. It has that psychological safety that you are a leader who can be trusted. And then they will relax and go with you. And I would proffer that this is the same in the workplace. Our team members are looking for this level of psychological safety from us as leaders to keep them safe. So we often think about listening and paying attention as something passive. But I don't think listening and paying attention is about doing something passive. I actually think it's about doing something that's very active. And it is about this being really present and being in the moment. It's about tuning in with our whole self and listening to tone and energy and to pauses. And it's about being fully present, even if somebody is silent. With the horses, obviously, they don't speak human, right? But you can see from their body language, as I said, from the way that they prick their ears, they look up when they sense that there's something approaching. We know exactly what's going on for them. Because the horses teach us that as a leader, it's all about how you show up. It's about your intention, your energy, and your congruence. And so they're going to give us honest, immediate feedback on how well we're listening, not just to ourselves, but to others and the environment. We are always paying attention on 3 levels. The level of self, what is going on within us? How are we feeling? Does something feel a bit off? Do we have a gut instinct that something's wrong? Or something's not quite aligned to what we were expecting? So need to pay attention to ourselves and our emotions and our feeling and what's going on there. Because our body gives us amazing information if we just tune into it. But a number of us have become quite disconnected from our bodies. We don't listen to those deep somatic feelings within our body and we shut them off. You've got to remember that your gut has as many brain cells, in fact, more than your brain. So when we talk about a gut instinct, it's like your brain thinking about something. We tend to listen to what our mind is saying, but we forget that there's so many receptors in your gut that are actually measuring what's happening in the environment and giving you clues as to what's happening. So listening to your body is so important. So we're listening to self, we're listening to others. In the case of the horses, we see it. But what about your team members? How are you really listening to your team members? How are we paying attention to what they're saying? Because I bet some of you have experienced this. Maybe you're in an office space or you ask them how they are and they go that they're fine. I'm fine. No problem, Julia, I'm fine. But you absolutely know that they're not, right? You instinctively know there's something about their body language and their presence that says to you everything's not right for them. And as humans, we have a great ability to try and mask what's going on for us. And the words that we say become incongruent with how we're really feeling. So we really need to pay attention for not only what's going on for us, but for other people around us, what's happening for our teammates, colleagues, or even your family. And then the environment, what's happening in terms of the environment that we need to be paying attention to. In the case of the workplace, that might be, what do we need to be aware of that perhaps our competitors are doing? That what new innovations are coming into the workplace that we need to become aware of? How do we need to pivot and adapt to what's going on? So we need that level of awareness. And what's really interesting is that companies that don't pay attention to what is going on in the environment are the companies that don't survive in the longer term. We're living in an environment that changes very rapidly. So that means that as a company or as a business, you need to pay attention to what's happening in the environment. Stay tuned in to what are future and upcoming trends in your industry sector. And we need to be able then to move and adjust the business to those new sectors almost before it happens. So we often talk about an S curve of reinvention. And a business cycle, if you think about it, typically goes through an S curve. A company, when it starts, it almost feels like it's going backwards as you get everything off the ground. Then you see some rapid acceleration. And then if you don't get into product extensions and innovations, the business will eventually curtail. But what we know to be true from all the research that we're doing at the Reinvention Academy is that you actually need to reinvent before you get to the top of the S curve, before you get to a mature cycle, so that you can move to the next S curve going forward. So that needs a level of attention from a business leader to really know what's going on. But I'd also like to proffer that it's not just the leader that needs to know that. Everyone within the organization needs to take collective responsibility by paying attention for the success of the firm, of the business. And when we look at a herd of horses, one of the things that they do is that they have what we call the diamond model of leadership. And attention is at the top of the diamond. This is where the focus goes. This is how the herd knows where to go for food and water. But what's important is that everyone within the herd is charged with paying attention. And the sentinels on the sides of the diamonds, when they see the danger, they step in and become the leader and take the herd to safety. So there is a collective responsibility for paying attention for the safety of the herd. And within the herd, it's all about health, harmony, and unity. Actually, I'd suggest that's really what we're looking for in business: health, harmony, and unity within the business unit. So there was a recent article in the Harvard Business Review by Zach Mercurio, who talked about the power and the urgency of noticing. So noticing, paying attention. And this is really interesting because he defines it as the intentional act of making people feel seen and valued. And I think this is a really important point in business today, where we have high levels of disengagement within the workplace and team members feel invisible. Actually making people feel valued and seen can absolutely transform things. This really makes me think of something that I've experienced in the last few weeks. As some of you will know, I sometimes run some restaurants at race courses and utilize some of my leadership skills from my catering career. One of the reasons I love to do this is because it's a little bit, I see it like a live learning lab. I get out to actually go and practice and work with teams, because one of the dangers as being a consultant is that I'm not live and on the cutting edge of what's going on. So I use these experiences to stay up to date and put into practice some of the latest leadership and teamwork thinking. And in this large restaurant that I run, so about 300, 400 guests in this restaurant during race meetings. And I usually have a pretty large team, 30 odd people. And usually we're very fortunate in that I have some people that can work more back of house and can actually do a lot of the jobs that are absolutely critical to enable the waiters and waitresses to serve the customers. So in other words, the people in back of house do jobs that we call like polishing cutlery. So once all the cutlery is being washed throughout service, I have people back of house and their job is simply to polish it. One of the last meet that we had, I didn't have any people back of house. And it was very interesting because at the end of service, even though I had briefed the waiters and waitresses that throughout the day they would need to polish cutlery in order that we had the resources in order to be able to lay up the tables and we had the equipment. Very few of them did that. So the result was we got to the end of the night and none of the cutlery was polished. And all of a sudden, all of the waitresses and waiters had to start polishing cutlery. And given that it usually takes a couple of people 3 hours to do, there was quite a lot of work to do. And it was a real eye-opener for them because they had never really appreciated what these people back of house were doing and how they made their job so much easier and possible. And this is the power of noticing and appreciation, really recognizing that everyone within your team plays a vital role. And without people doing some of those, what you might term less glamorous roles, the operation doesn't function. And as I said, those waiters and waitresses had a big wake-up call about how important other people were on the team to their success. So I just want to talk a little bit about the diamond model of leadership, because this is the model of shared leadership that we use, inspired by the horses, created by a company called Teaching Horse. And attention and noticing is one of the key leadership capabilities in the model. And attention isn't just cognitive focus, it's the ability, as I said, to be aware of yourself, others, and the environment in real time. And what the model teaches us is that shared leadership requires us to respond to the environment, and being able to respond requires us to notice. And noticing can shift in energy. And you can see this through pauses in conversation, emotional cues, team dynamics, and environmental signals. So as we think about noticing, my invitation to you would be, how can you encourage your team to notice what is happening in the environment around you? How can you work with the team to share the leadership? Because that is so important. Because the herd are always attuned to one another and their surroundings. And what Mercurio's research shows is that teams respond and perform best to leaders who notice first and act second. And what that ensures that the leadership is grounded in real-time relational intelligence. So I want you to think about that. Leaders notice first and act second. And this is what the horses are very good at doing. They're very good at noticing and then discerning what action to take. So, for example, if the horse saw some smoke in the distance, they need to look up, they need to pay attention, notice smoke, could be danger, could be a forest fire coming, or maybe it's somebody just having a barbecue. But what I notice a lot more in the business world is leaders who notice but don't pause. They notice and they immediately respond. And actually, often in that moment, they are causing chaos around them. They jump in without really assessing the situation and what is truly happening on the ground. And maybe some of you have experienced that. I know I have. And my invitation to you as a leader is the power of the pause, to notice something, pause, really assess what's going on, and then you can take some considered action based on what you know, rather than the firefighting that we see so often happening in organizations where something goes awry and everyone jumps in and everyone's got an opinion and the energy gets really chaotic and really frantic, and all of a sudden we don't know what's going on, everyone's running around. How would it be as a leader if you could go, okay, yeah, I see that. And then take a moment to reflect and really think about what are the implications of that. Is that a priority maybe we even need to respond to right now? Or is that something that can be parked and something that can be dealt with at a later time? So within the Unbridled Teamship Roadmap, one of my accelerators there is called Awaken the Awareness. And this is all about the power of paying attention and noticing and being present. It's about slowing down to sense what's really happening, noticing the misalignments between words and actions, between intent and impact, and then choosing to respond rather than react. Because what I know to be true from all the people that I've led and worked with is that all anyone really wants is to be seen and to be feel valued and to be heard. And the best way as a leader that we can do that is to give somebody our full attention. We have two ears and one mouth for a reason. I'd encourage you as a leader to think about how can I really listen and pay attention to what my team want and need and give them exactly that big gift of paying them attention. How many leaders and bosses that you go and speak to, when you're talking to them, are still tapping away on their keyboard or scrolling through their phone? They're not really paying you attention. So slow down, stop, give somebody 100, 110% of your attention. And that will make a massive difference to how they feel, but more importantly, how you connect to them. And we talked a lot about connection on the podcast and how important that is in business to build relationships. Because when we awaken this awareness, we shift from transactional interactions to transformational partnerships. And that's really where the magic starts in business. So I'm just going to close by sharing with you a few practical ways to build awareness. So the first one is what I call stillness before strategy. It's take a moment of silence before each meeting to ground yourself. Arrive fully, arrive present, don't be distracted. How about having a noticing round at the beginning of every meeting with something like, what's something you've noticed this week about yourself or our team? So encourage people to notice what's going on around them. Help people take the blinkers off that so many of us have when we're just working so much in our lane, we don't see anything else. The third way might be something that we call mirror more. Reflect what somebody said and what you sensed. For example, I noticed you paused before answering. What was going on for you there? This really shows that you're paying attention to what's going on. Or I noticed that you felt a bit uncomfortable when you said that. What's going on for you there? Slow your response. This is all about allowing the silence. I know many of us don't really like the silence, but it's so powerful. It gives us that opportunity to breathe and think before jumping in with an answer. So really just give yourself permission to breathe and slow down. And finally, my best recommendation is to spend some time in nature. Nature is always in listening mode. Go for a walk, pay attention to the sounds, the textures, the rhythms. The more you practice, the more you notice what is going on around you. And in fact, quite a fun exercise to do is actually blindfold yourself so that you can't actually see what's going on, and really start honing the rest of your senses to tune in and really notice what is happening around you. So my invitation to you this week is to think about what might you be missing in yourself, your team, or your business, simply because you are not paying attention. Noticing and listening aren't soft skills, they're leadership superpowers. They build trust, they fuel performance, and they create a space for others to step into their brilliance. So whether you're leading a boardroom or you're coming and working with us on one of our Unbridled Success retreats, the principles are the same. Leadership starts with awareness. And so if you're curious about how the Unbridled Teamship Roadmap could help you and your business awaken your awareness and improve your powers of attention and noticing, then let's have a conversation. The horses are always listening. So until next time, keep noticing, keep listening, and keep leading. Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.